Welcome to The Bone, the podcast that goes deeper. Here we cut through the noise and get straight to the core of the issues that matter. From real stories to raw truths, we dive deep into the conversations that shape our world and challenge our thinking. We're not afraid to dig in and get to the marrow of it all. Whether it's life, culture, or business in sports medicine, we're here to break it down raw and real. No filters, no fluff, just to the bone. With your host, Shelby Daly, we're getting to the bone. This is a clinically pressed, approved CEU podcast. Find the quiz to gain credit at clinicallypressed.org/courses. Clinically Pressed Company, making the complicated simple through results that give back. Find out more at clinicallypressed.org. Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Bone, the sports medicine podcast, where we dig into conversations that shape athletic care, professional ethics, and the future of sport. Today's episode is one that hits close to home for anyone who's ever stood for athletes' safety, fairness, and integrity of competition. My guest today is Payton McNabb, a former multi-sport student athlete from North Carolina, whose life changed in an instant during a high school volleyball game. What began as a routine play turned into a life-altering concussion, and a national conversation about safety standards, fairness in women's sports, and what it really means to advocate for the health and protection of all athletes. Since then, Payton has become a national advocate and ambassador with Independent Women, traveling the country and sharing her story to help advance Stand with Women legislation options and the Women's Bill of Rights, which is focused on defining and preserving sex-based protections in law and sport. In this episode, we're unpacking her journey from injury to recovery to advance and reform. We'll talk about what athlete care looked like that day, what's changed since, and how athletic trainers can navigate their ethical responsibility in the evolving sports landscape. So welcome to the show, Payton.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So now, we haven't met in person, but I was introduced to you through the Micro podcast, the way I heard it, and heard about your athletic experience. It seemed that you were put in a tough position as a high school student athlete. Before we get into the story, I just want to introduce to listeners that may not be familiar with what athletic training is, but an athletic trainer is a healthcare professional who specializes in injury prevention and risk management, while also providing clinical evaluation, emergency care, therapeutic intervention, and rehabilitation for physically active individuals. They use evidence-based practice to promote health, optimize performance, and ensure safe participation across diverse environments. So Payton, you were a three-sport student athlete before your injury, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
What sports did you play, and what did athletics mean to you growing up?
So yeah, I was a three-sport athlete from the moment I could walk. We all got into sports. It's pretty much how my whole family was. It pretty much shaped who I was as a person. Down to even our vacations, all of my friends, all of my memories are based somewhat around one of my sports. I played basketball, volleyball, and softball. And yeah, I volleyball I started the latest out of all the three, but they really just they taught me everything I knew. Like, it taught me leadership, it taught me communication skills. I grew so many friendships lifelong through my different teams in different sports. I played travel softball pretty much year round while I was playing these other sports as well. So I don't know. I think that they pretty much shaped me who I was as a person, and I can speak for myself and pretty much my whole family. They meant a lot to us growing up, and they still very much do.
Yeah. So can you walk us through what happened the day of the volleyball game where the viral kill shot video happened?
Yeah, so we went into that I was trying to be as positive as I could. I was one of the team captains. I was the starting setter on the team. So I'd been playing against this guy for a few years at that point, but COVID kind of cut our high school in half. Like, it made things kind of weird, and so we didn't really, we thought that was a guy, but we never, it was never confirmed for sure at the time. and he didn't hit puberty until when guys usually tend to do so. So around our junior year, it became very obvious that there was a guy on the other side of the net, and we had to prepare differently in order to prepare just for this one player. The team wasn't like the best team ever or anything. They highly depended on this guy, and they were in our conference, so we couldn't not play them. And we had a very young team. They were so scared to even play. So I'm trying to be as encouraging and motivating as I can. So when I am the one that gets knocked out unconscious, I'm laying there for half a minute in a fencing position, and I never played volleyball again after that. That was really hard, and it was really hard for the girls that I played with because the freshman setter had to go in for me and fill in that exact position that they just saw that happened in, and they did not take the guy out, and she was shaking. She was so scared because, I mean, why wouldn't you be? I not like when I used to get hurt or whatever, I would not like I would do anything I could to keep playing. I was not the kind that would barely get hurt and be out for the rest of the game. Like, I was always taught to shake it off and to keep going. So for that to take me out in that way, that was saying a lot to them. And yeah, I think that's what's really motivated me through this whole thing, is really just for that one team, especially because what we all went through should have never happened, and that was failed leadership.
Yeah. So you were on the receiving side of a spike, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you went unconscious. What happened after that? Do you remember?
I remember when I woke up, everyone was crowded around me. They did not know what to do. I mean, the whole gym was silent. Everyone knew what just happened. And once I came to, the athletic trainer asked me if I knew what just happened to me. And I was like, well, yeah, that guy on y'all's team just knocked me out. And totally stunned by my response, definitely not prepared to answer something like that because we're not supposed to talk about it. So he rushed me off the court. He did one finger test on me and said I was all good to go back into play. So literally, he just made me follow his finger with my eyes, and that's all that he got from that, which always struck me because that's never been the case. I feel like when someone gets hurt, I've twisted my ankle before, and the trainer didn't want me to go back in for the rest of the game just to be careful. So the fact that he thought it would be okay for me to go back in after being completely unconscious, that's always just been so weird to me, like that it was trying to cover something up.
And this was the hosting athletic trainer, not your athletic trainer, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So after that, you were cleared to go back in. Did you go back in?
No, thankfully my coaches and my administration that were at the game were not letting that happen under any circumstance. So thankfully I did not go back in, but if they didn't know any better, then I could have went right back in because my adrenaline was rushing. I mean, I didn't feel it until on the way back, and I was trying to go back in. I was furious, and I just kept repeating over and over, like, that should have never happened to me. Y'all should have never let that boy play. I wouldn't have literally just been unconscious on the gym floor. But yeah, I couldn't believe that. But thankfully they did not let me return to play.
Well, as a healthcare provider myself, in 2022, concussion protocols were very well established. It is very interesting that it kind of got, pushed aside. Even if it was a political thing, safety's first.
Exactly.
So, I think that's what really struck me when I heard your story on the Mike Rowe podcast was you obviously had a red flag sign, and for them to approve you to go back in was absolutely inappropriate. So your coaching staff didn't put you back in. They knew it was a pretty severe injury. What happened afterwards? Did anybody follow up with you? How did you guys approach this with the school board? What happened after the game?
Yeah, so I was in a really unique position. My dad was actually my principal, so it was really weird, and no one really knew like what to do. I'm from a very, very rural North Carolina. Like, this is not, I've never even seen this before. None of us knew how to approach this. This does not happen where we live. So it really, like, what I always try to remind people is it's always very easy to say what you would do in that position. until
Mm-hmm.
you're actually in it. Because, like, beforehand, we were all like, we would never let this happen. This would never happen to us or whatever. And then it did. I mean, it happened right in our town. So it was just, it was so weird. I don't know. That was thankfully the only game that my parents did not go to. Something came up on both sides, so neither of them were there. So I had to ride the bus back after that, and my parents met me halfway. And by the time they got to me, that's when it started noticing that there was something wrong. I started to repeat things a lot, and I mean, I don't really remember any of this, but this is just what like my teammates and my family have told me since. But I was repeating myself a lot. I couldn't recall really what happened, and you know, with concussions, or at least what we thought, like we would wait a few days and see if I would do no screen time, stay in the dark as much as you can. I wear sunglasses everywhere. I didn't drive for a few months, but we let it progress and see if it got worse or better before we went to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And a few days went by and it just continued to get worse. I was sleeping all day, like literally all day, and everywhere we went, I would fall asleep. That's when they noticed like there's obviously something wrong with me. So they took me to my primary doctor. She immediately referred me to a neurologist. I went there shortly after, and that's where they explained to me I have a I had a concussion and permanent whiplash and a really small partial brain bleed, but still like a brain bleed nonetheless from that. So it was just, I don't know, it was just like a shock. I could not believe that that was allowed to happen to me. I mean, it was just insane. So I'm very thankful that I had a great community and a great family who always watched me. Like when I went to school, I had to start getting help because I had really bad cognitive issues, and that never happened before. I was top of my class, and from going from that to me needing to test in separate rooms and get help on my homework and stuff like that just wasn't me. And it was heartbreaking. I mean, my friends were having to help me as much as they could, and everyone's trying to make this a normal experience for me. It's my senior year. I'd been working my whole life at that point for this year, and for it to just go away like as soon as it started, this was my first week of school, this happened. It was just devastating.
Yeah. So the whiplash injury, is that just that you have constant neck pain or you're lacking range of motion? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, it was kind of both. I couldn't really turn my head a lot. I had neck pain pretty bad for, and that was a lot worse in the first year or two. I had to go to the chiropractor pretty much weekly for a good amount of time, which helped tremendously. I mean, that really was probably the best thing I could have done for that. But yeah, I wasn't able to really turn my head a lot. The partial paralysis is something that I always bring up, and a lot of people will hear that and be like, "Oh, you're walking" or whatever. Like, obviously, I can walk, like I'm not paralyzed, but my partial paralysis was from like my right side was lagging. I still could walk just fine, but my right foot would be turning out, or my right arm wouldn't swing when I walked. And it's just little things like that that just weren't, like, my body just wasn't working properly. And those are still things that I still kind of deal with to this day. And it's been 3 years. But of course, it's gotten a lot better since then, thankfully.
With your recovery, obviously that was the primary importance of making sure that you were getting proper care. I guess within the school district, was there anything else happening around this situation, or was it kind of blown off?
No, so another good thing about my family, my mom especially, we don't let things go. They're for sure like kept talking about it. I mean, we were trying to get help from everybody. Our state officials in North Carolina were refusing to help me. No one was wanting to help. But thankfully my school board did. We have 3 schools in my county. Each school got to vote. Their volleyball team got to vote on if they wanted to play this team or not. 2 out of the 3 said no. My school, and then obviously one of the other schools said no, they did not feel safe playing against this team or this guy. So due to that vote, we were no longer allowed to play them for the remainder of his time there. So that is a conference team, and we have a very small conference. And we were no longer allowed to play them. So we had to forfeit to them. So they ultimately ended up getting the conference championship because we we refused to play them because of what happened to me. So I mean, it's just insanity, but I'm very thankful that our school board did step up and take action very quickly.
Yeah. So it sounded like some associations were ignoring you. Did anybody outside of the school district reach out to you after this incident?
Yeah, so thankfully, there is this group called NC Values. They reached out to me and asked me. They're trying to pass this bill in North Carolina. They'd been trying to pass it, Protection of Women in Sports bill, and they really wanted me to come and share my story at the General Assembly, which was like 9 hours. Like Raleigh's about 9 hours from my house, and they asked me to come and speak at that in hopes of getting some momentum on this bill because it had been stuck for so long. And I went out there. I didn't even know what the General Assembly was. Like, I never thought it would get this far at all. But I just thought, maybe if I could share my story, it could at least help one other girl. It could at least help my sister, who's also a three-sport athlete in North Carolina. Because the thought of that happening to her infuriates me. Like, it makes me way more mad than it happening to myself.
Mhm.
And I went out there, I spoke, and that's where I met Raleigh Gaines for the first time and ended up, that's where I also was introduced to independent women's, which I'm sure we'll talk about that more later. But I shared my story, and that bill ended up getting vetoed by our former governor, Roy Cooper, but it ended up getting overridden and signed into law, which was a huge win, especially for my state because it's so like you just never know where things are going to go. So thankfully that program did reach out to me, but at the time that was the only people that had. No one else had really in my state had tried to help me whatsoever.
Did any other associations like healthcare or even athletic associations, did any of those types of groups reach out to you at all?
No, I think like a lot of people just would see it as way too controversial or whatever. Thankfully, I've met some great people along the way who have like wanted to help me with private. I'm trying to think of the word. Like they know a doctor that they went to or whatever, and they would try to connect me in that way, but not really. No, like it was kind of sad because they're choosing politics over my health.
Mm-hmm. And before this injury, did you have any athletic aspirations and collegiate athletics at all?
I did. I actually wanted to play college softball. It was never college volleyball. Like that's another thing too. Everyone's like thinking I'm acting like I'm a D1 volleyball player. I wasn't at all. But I did really want to play college softball. I pretty much played that year round. Like I said earlier, I was on countless travel teams and had the hopes of playing that one day. But because of the injury that happened at the beginning of my senior year, like this was the prime year to be doing all that, then like all of that was taken away because I just couldn't perform like I had prior to that.
Yeah. So after the injury, I'm sure you talked to your healthcare provider and they determined, yeah, you probably need to retire from sports. How did this event change your trajectory personally and professionally? Are you still attending colleges today?
So it was really hard for me to go to school. I am at school now, I'm online, but I did go for a full year at Western Carolina, and that was really hard. I didn't realize like it was still affecting me that much. I did have to get tutoring and stuff like that, but that was hard. Being at home has helped a lot just with like all the outside stress that was going into it as well. But I do also want to highlight I did play basketball and softball afterwards. That's something that also gets like that's like a misconception there. I probably shouldn't have. Like no one wanted me to. My parents didn't want me to. Even my doctor was like really hesitant about it. But I did all of the protocol stuff. Like with practice, I had to. I'm just from a very unique area. Like my cousin's my basketball coach, and my dad also calls ball. Like he's an official, so all the officials knew my situation and what was going on. So if I even slightly got hit, the whole game was stopping and I had to go out. He was very clear in practice. They could like I could practice, but to the side even, or they couldn't touch me or whatever. Like things were put in place for sure, but I just couldn't. I just wanted to play so bad because I knew this was it. Like, this was the last time it was ever going to happen. I knew
Mhm.
it wasn't going to extend after I graduated. So I never played volleyball again, but honestly, my parents thought of basketball kind of like as my physical therapy, and I think that really did help a lot. Like, I still was exercising and having to use my hand-eye coordination and things like that. So I think that did help, and I was really, really depressed. I also didn't really experience that before this, and it hit me very hard, and I was just, I don't know, I just couldn't, I don't know, it was really hard. So I did play again, but it just wasn't like I had before. Like, my junior year, I was way better than my senior year, which doesn't, like, that doesn't add up. So
Yeah. And then mental health wise, have you received any help with that or seen anybody for that?
I did have to go to therapy a little for a while, but that's really been the only thing that I've done. I have gotten a lot better with that as well. Kind of like getting into the word and praying a lot about it. But that's just been the biggest thing that's helped me. I haven't really seen anybody for that either. We just never knew what the right option was or really where to go that would actually want to help me and not just try to cover it up. Like, we didn't really have a lot of trust in these people.
Do you feel that these speaking engagements and the advocacy that you are providing is helping with the situation at all and moving forward?
For sure, I think from the beginning of when we first started, there was not this many people talking about it at all. They were a lot more hesitant to really speak out because I feel like cancel culture was still kind of relevant then, just like a couple years ago. But now, I mean, with more and more people speaking out, and that was the goal. That was always the goal from the beginning with me and everyone that started out, like especially Riley. That was always the goal, to encourage others to have that same confidence in being able to say what they feel and speak up for the truth. And we see it more and more every day. Unfortunately, it's because more and more girls are being injured or discriminated against every day. Like, there's a new story pretty much weekly about this happening somewhere else in the country. That's unfortunate, but it has brought more and more people to wake up and realize this is way bigger than what, they originally thought it was. They thought you're making a problem out of nothing. But I've always said, why not be proactive instead of reactive? Why did my state wait until someone was permanently injured before thinking like the law should pass to prevent that? You shouldn't do that. Like, it's not making a problem out of nothing. It's like making sure that there are no problems, because it is happening. Like, if it's happening in Murphy, North Carolina, it's happening everywhere. And I think that's been proven time and time again. So I think that cancel culture is dead, and I could not be more happy about that.
So you've become very involved with the Independent Women's Forum. Can you explain their mission and what they're trying to do?
They have been so good to me. They have really helped me out from the beginning. I've been with them since I spoke out for the first time. And we have traveled across the nation speaking at, like, in front of Congress, in front of states, on national TV, just constantly getting stories out there and elevating what these girls and women have went through and how unfair and unjust it is. And they have done just a phenomenal job with making these stories known and empowering these women to have the courage to keep telling their stories. And I could not be more thankful for all the change that they have helped make in our laws, and I'm so thankful to be on their team.
So are they the ones backing the Women's Bill of Rights, or is that a separate group?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
They pretty much all, like, they've done they do all the sports bills, but also they're doing the bathroom bills and the locker rooms and all that stuff. I really like their work in the prisons, and how, these guys are just saying, like the women in prison, they can't even get free tampons or toilet paper, but the guys can get a free gender change or whatever. So it's just insane, and just bringing light to these insane stories. And, people don't think that it's happening, but it is. And it sounds comical, but it's actually reality.
Why do you think these initiatives resonate as a reality check for so many people?
I just think with like what I was saying earlier, you don't realize how big it is until it happens to you. And I think it's just happened to so many people in so many scenarios, literally in every single one, down to the prisons, to the sororities, to the locker rooms. It has infiltrated every single group and every single place that women go. I mean, it's every single space. So I think the more and more people are talking about it and talking about it freely, it's allowing others to realize, like, this isn't made up. This is real life, and it's really affecting these girls and taking away opportunity and fairness and safety for them.
Yeah. Well, I've kind of pushed the point of this issue to other people, and they seem to really minimize it. Keep saying, like, oh, well, there's only like 10 collegiate athletes right now. There's only 10 high school athletes. They really try to minimize it for how important they make it seem. But I think that's where it's crazy is, well, that is a small number, but it's that we keep allowing it. So when does it get out of hand and it's a majority of the athletic team is transgendered. So that's where, I think that's a good reality check too is, yeah, it's like it drips a lot and then it's flooding and it takes over the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly said. For sure. I mean, it grows by the day. The 10 college athletes that everyone keeps saying, like, first of all, it's not even true. And second of all, exactly, how many girls need to be injured before it's actually a problem or it's a big enough problem? One is way too many. So I've never understood that argument at all. And I think it really has no substance, but that's the only one that they have.
So since you're interacting with a lot of politicians, media outlets, and the general public, how is their reaction to your advocacy?
It's for sure one-sided. I mean, I obviously, like, the Republicans are the only ones that talk about it and understand that it's biologically untrue that a man could ever become a woman and that be fair. I had the opportunity of testifying in front of the Doge committee earlier this year, and we were in there for 3 hours. I only got questions from the Republican side. The Democrats never even said one word or asked one question to me and Stephanie, my friend who was testifying, because she was the fencer that got disqualified for refusing to go against the guy.
Mm-hmm.
And like what you were saying earlier, this also touches on that. The way that they talked to her, they completely minimized her and belittled her sport, saying, well, it's just fencing, so why would we care, basically.
Yeah.
And it's just like that's another thing. How can they even say that? That she has committed her life to her sport and she is exceptionally well at it, and she
Mm-hmm.
just got kicked out of her tournament because of this grown man who is trying to act like he's a little girl. Like, I'll never understand that ever. But I think it has just been so clear which side cares and which side doesn't. Ultimately, I believe everyone agrees with the reality side of it, whether they want to admit that or not. The other side's just not allowed to say that, which is so sad. And that's just going to continue to be a losing point for them. But no, I really do think that. I think that everyone agree. Like, it's just common sense. It sounds so stupid that we're still having to even explain that. Because I've always said, like, I'm 20 years old and I'm having to sit in front of Congress and explain that there's a biological difference between a man and a woman to these people who have been elected officials who are supposed to be, like, running the country. Why do I have to explain that to them? Like, my 5-year-old cousin understands that there's a difference, but they don't. So I truly do believe everyone knows. It's just a delusion and a lie, and that's going to continue to be a losing talking point for them if they don't realize, like, it's never going to win, ever.
So, from your perspective, I know that you didn't have an athletic trainer at your small high school, but within the medical community, what role do you feel that they have in this topic? What should they be advocating for ultimately?
Yeah, I really wish that we did have one, but we didn't have one at our school. But I've always thought, because that was a big injury that he was ultimately the first one on scene, I guess, to me, and he completely failed, and that could have resulted in worse injury for me. So yeah, I think that more trainers should speak out and take a stand for it because that's something that they're going to have to keep dealing with inevitably if it keeps being allowed. And they should understand that as well, that there's a difference between their male and female athletes. So I think that would be a great source if more athletic trainers were willing to speak out. But again, it's just like these people are afraid of losing their jobs. They don't want to get involved in something that they don't have to be involved in. But I think that would really help a lot if they were willing to do that. And I think that more people would be supportive of them than against them for sure if they were willing to do that for their female athletes.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know why it's so controversial that your job is at risk for bringing this up. That's where I think society has gone bonkers.
Exactly.
Is we should at least be able to have the conversation and debate about it, and it's just fully closed off. And I mean, that's why I wanted to have you on, because I just feel that the debate is so one-sided, and we're not even listening to technically the majority athlete that is complaining, worried, scared ultimately. And we have laws in place that are supposed to defend a biological female with Title IX technically, and it's just not being upheld. And I'm surprised there aren't more lawsuits coming up backing with the Title IX on this issue. So I'm very confused ultimately. I've had a transgendered athlete. It was a female to male, and they were a fencer. And I remember that they kept getting injured, but they wouldn't even disclose to me what drugs they were on, their hormone treatment, where they were in the process. So it was very difficult for me to provide good care because it was very secretive, or they just didn't want to acknowledge it because they've mentally bought into that they're already a male. So it was very frustrating from my standpoint to provide good care when information was being withheld. And we don't have to go into it today because you're not an athletic trainer, but there's a reason why we have research on biological female injuries. They're at higher risk of just different things. They have different performance parameters, nutrition, all those different things. And that's where it's really frustrating, is putting transgenders into the mix really throws off the data to provide good care to biological female athletes. And then going into healthcare advocacy, I mean, the principles that we follow is do no harm, act in the patient's best interest, respect the autonomy and confidentiality, and uphold integrity and lifelong learning. And I feel that with this whole debate, we're not actually doing that for a big population of our patient demographics. So that's where, it's a headache ultimately that we're having this discussion.
Yeah, I think that was perfectly said, and I think that's like that's a huge part of it that no one really talks about. So I didn't even really think about all of that. So I can't even imagine how much harder that is on y'all's end to be able
Yeah.
to provide the care that these athletes need.
Yeah. So yeah, athletic trainers are expected to advocate for athlete safety regardless of the gender identity. I mean, that means biological women too.
Yeah.
So that's where I feel like that gets brushed under the rug on this situation. So from a student athlete's perspective, does this really contradict the Title IX? I'm not sure what all evidence you use when you go out and talk about this stuff. I don't understand why this issue exists with these types of rules, and it technically contradicts the Me Too movement to an extent too, doesn't it?
For sure. For sure. That's why I've never understood, like, I don't know. Like, I feel like we've always heard, where's the feminist in this movement? Because it just kind of sounds like it's just one group of people who are willing to say it, and they're just so against being with the Republicans, I guess, like on their side, that they're totally disregarding that. And it's going completely against the Me Too movement. I mean, how do you claim to be a feminist, but you're all about the guy going in the women's restroom or locker room and changing with them and then taking all of their medals and spots on teams and scholarships. Like, it's a whole snowball effect. And I literally will never understand that. And we've said that over and over again. But at the end of the day, it really just comes down to they do not want to agree with the right side. And that's so sad. That's so sad. It's putting so many girls at risk, and it's ruining their opportunities. Everything the sports has given me, now girls aren't even going to want to play. They are quitting their teams because they don't want to be injured, or they're upset because their spot got taken by a dude. And it's just like, it's insanity, and it completely goes against all of what women have fought for so long. Title IX was created to protect women and give them that opportunity, and it does completely contradict it, allowing men to just put a wig on and act like they fought the same battles to get where we are today. And we're very blessed to be able to do what we can at this point in the world, and it's like we're backtracking from all this progress we've made. All the women who fought so hard to be able to be here, and even some of them are agreeing with the trans stuff. And it's like, what do you mean? Like, that goes against everything that you fought for, because we're regressing, and it's insane. And then with the Title IX thing, when it went from, let me look up what the original Title IX was like 30 words or something. And when it went from that to when Biden tried to rewrite it to like 1,000,000 words, 1,000,000 word long document. Like, how do you do that? It's actually supposed to be as simple as, if you're a woman, you're allowed to participate in sports. So you're allowed to have the same opportunities. And then it got turned into that. So I that's another thing. I'm just so thankful that the election went the way it went, so that got retracted, and now everything's back to the same. But it is saddening that there are still, even with the executive order that was signed and all these bills that have passed in these different states, there are still states that are refusing to follow the law. And they're just putting the elected officials who are refusing that are putting every single girl in their state at risk, and they should be held accountable for that.
Well, and I think the actual definitions used in the Title IX, since vocabulary is very important to the people pushing this stuff, it says on the basis of sex, which sex is biological, female or male, where gender is what you identify as, I guess. Like,
yeah,
it's so convoluted now that they keep trying to change the meaning of words, and that's where it gets hard. And so Title IX, it says sex, and they harp on sex and gender all the time, and they can't even, comprehend that when they're reading the Title IX law. So that's where it is ultimately like craziness to me when listening to some of these questions and what they're trying to push forward. So looking forward, what message do you have for young female athletes today about their safety, fairness, and finding their voice?
That you don't owe silence to anyone. I've been saying that a lot recently, because that is just so true. I mean, you don't. Like, when you know that something is wrong, you have every right to speak up about it and to say how you feel. And, you shouldn't have to worry about you losing your job or losing your spot on your team or whatever it may be. Like, you have every right to say something, because it is wrong. And everyone that's saying that it isn't is lying to you and gaslighting you into silence. And that's never okay. Your safety and your fairness and your opportunity matter way more than anything they could do to you. And, I've always known I was right. So I've never been worried about saying it, because I know that it's backed by science. And like, from the beginning of time, we've known that there's a difference between a man and a woman, and nothing is ever going to change that. All these years later, there isn't, like, that's not possible for none of that to matter anymore after it's mattered for the history of the world. So I I've always been preaching that recently. You do not owe silence to one single person. Always stand up for yourself. If something happens to you, you will have millions of people that are behind you and admire your strength for standing up and speaking the truth when it was really, really hard. So you'll always have people on your side.
Well, and that's where it's silly, is that the liberals keep preaching, be yourself, be your true self. Yet when biological females are being their true self and fighting for it, it gets smashed pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Be yourself, but only if it is exactly what they tell you to be.
Yeah. So with your involvement and your advocacy, how can athletic trainers, coaches, associations, organizations contribute to meaningful change on this subject?
Pretty much exactly what I just said before. Like, that goes for them too, because I understood that at the beginning, being kind of hesitant to speak out because you've worked your whole life to get this job, like you're in your dream job, and it's like, do I throw that all away for a cause like this? But now my point of view, and before I kind of understood like that, being hesitant about that, but now I'm like, I don't understand that at all. Like, you should be able, first of all, you shouldn't even be afraid. Like you were saying earlier, you should never even be afraid to that you're going to lose your job if you say something that's fundamentally true. But you also you should want to do that, and I think it's becoming more popular by the day. More people are wanting to stand up for this and wanting to stand up for their daughters, and everyone has a woman in their life, whether that's your mom, your sister, your cousin, whatever. Everyone knows one woman, and it's affecting them, and it will affect them inevitably if this continues to go on. So standing up for it and stopping it now before it does happen to you and your family and in your life and your community, that's going to be way more important than, you know, whatever someone threatens you with, because really they can't even do that.
Yeah. I think there's enough evidence too now that you can very easily create a lawsuit and defend yourself.
For sure. For sure.
So for you, what's the next project you're working on?
I've been very blessed to work with independent women and be able to testify in front of different groups of people, and I'm going to continue to do that. I've never really had a plan. Like, I've never known what I wanted to do, even in high school when I was supposed to pretty much be figuring that out. I never knew. Like, I always was like, whatever the Lord has planned for me, that's where I'll follow. And He's pretty much had a plan this whole time, and I've been following it the best I could. So it's going to continue to do that as best as I can and kind of see where I end up. The fight is definitely not over, and I'm not going to stop fighting until it is. And I truly do believe that day will come. I think we will look back on this and be like, what the heck was going on? Like, how did it get that far? But that time is not anytime soon, because it is still happening every single day. So we still got a lot more work to do, and I'm going to continue to push forward until, if I ever get blessed enough to have kids one day, I never want them to think it was even a possibility that there's a guy on the other side of the net or on the court, because there was a time in my life when I thought that as well. So I just want to get back to that, and for our future generation, because that's who this is all for. And I think that's pretty much how everyone in this fight feels about it as well. It's all for the next generation, because this should never happen again.
Yeah. If somebody wanted to get involved, where can they get in contact? What website should they visit? What kind of involvement is there out there for people that want to get behind this?
I think a great resource, I mean, I might be biased, but IWF.org, that's a great way to get started. I mean, you can sign up for newsletters, and there's so many real stories and links to get involved, and it really, really does show everything you need to know about what's going on. And yeah, I think that's a great way to start, is just start there, and it pretty much has everything you would need to know. Everyone that's in our business and that has similar stories to me, or completely different stories, but it's still somehow we're all connected because of this gender ideology. It shows all of that there. So I think that's a great resource, and all of that is on that page. So IWF.org.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I don't know, is there anything else that we missed or that you wanted to talk about before we close up?
I think you pretty much got it, but I think something I always add at the end is, to me, this has never been about myself. Like, I knew my time playing was over once this happened. So this has never been about me. This is always, like I said, for the next generation and for every single woman and girl who has devoted their life to the sport that they love, and not even just in the sports, but in all spaces. And I'm going to continue to fight for that, and just encourage everyone to fight for their daughter, fight for their sister, because they need strong women and strong men who are willing to say no and enough is enough, because it's been past the time when we needed to say that.
Yeah. Well, Payton, thank you for sharing your story and for the courage it takes to keep speaking out about this, not just for yourself, but for the safety and fairness of future athletes. Welcome back. I've brought Dr. Simi on to talk more about this topic of biological women in athletics. Welcome to the show, and waiting to hear what your insights are on this topic.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I just had Payton on before this, and we were talking about why is it so difficult for athletic trainers to advocate for biological female athletes. I know that we as healthcare providers need to provide unbiased care, but even with inclusion, there's exclusion at the same time, and it feels like it's infringing on female athletes that are trying to just compete and be part of sports. What are your thoughts on it?
I know the last 2 to 5 years have been heavy on this topic. There's been multiple conversations, so this is not the first conversation that's going to be had about female athletes, male athletes that maybe identify as female athletes. That whole kind of gamut right now. Yes, it's a touchy subject, but it's very important to engage in those conversations. I think we're going to cut this and rephrase the question, because I had a good thought, but you can cut this, crop it. Okay. Rephrase it. I had a great thought too. Float it away.
Okay.
What's the touch? I think, like you said, with the push being inclusion with certain individuals, with the whole gender, what gender what gender do they claim? What is their biological sex? That conversation comes into play. Like, okay, how do they identify? Who do they identify as? Now, the big push recently has been, how do we include them in sport? Do they go on the male side? Do they go on the female side? For the sake of this conversation, just when I say they, it means those people that maybe identify differently than what is the typical heterosexual norm. So for the sake of the conversation, when I say they, that is what I mean. Just so we understand that. So including them I think is important, that we need to find a space or create space in the current space already for them to be able to compete. But in the past couple of years, doing so has excluded, there's been more exclusion on traditional heterosexual male sports, on kind of what they're allowed to say, what they're allowed to preach, and how they want to include, along with traditional heterosexual female side of how they want to be included in the conversation, how they want to be kept safe, as what they say. So while including them, the genre of people that maybe are in between genders, choose a different gender, choose a different sex, whatever it may be, yeah, we have excluded more of the traditional heterosexual female and their voice, when the purpose in the beginning was, I think, how do we empower the female voice? Now, I know I'm speaking on this topic as a heterosexual male myself, so my opinion is very biased towards my cultural background, my upbringing, and my current status. So I know I speak from that lens. So I do agree, though, that there has been a bit of exclusion and a bit of muting the mic, if you will, on heterosexual females when they try to speak about topics that concern them, such as safety in the locker room, safety in the bathroom, safety in competing against individuals that were probably traditionally heterosexual male, or their sex is male, even if they identify as a woman or female. There may be a disadvantage to traditional female athletes competing against that. And that discrepancy is it just a discrepancy that we need to work through, or is it a discrepancy that may cause harm because there's such a drastic difference? I think that's where the conversation is. And as athletic trainers, we need to be in this conversation. The last couple of years, I know it's been fearful to have these conversations. Doesn't matter what side you're on, it's a little fearful to have this because of fear of being canceled. So I think cancel culture has also embedded its way into athletics, into athletic training world, where, we have to be inclusive of everybody. And of course we want to be inclusive. Categorizing and understanding a safe place for people to play is not exclusivity. It's inclusivity, but understanding the differences at play here. So I think we need to be a part of those conversations, first and foremost, for safety.
Well, I think the cancel culture has created a complacency for biological female athletes because they don't want to be canceled, like you talked about. And I think that's where it's in the best interest of an athletic trainer to actually step up and make sure these conversations are being had. I don't think it should be the responsibility of the biological female to have to step up in these spaces, the regulatory bodies, the organizations, the athletic departments, because ultimately athletic trainers are advocates to prioritize athlete health, safety, and privacy. So that's where I think inclusion has been warped to an extent, and that's where it's causing exclusion at the same time. It's just a spot on a roster is being taken by a transgendered female rather than a biological female. So who really deserves that spot? There are organizations that provide co-ed leagues and sports and stuff. And I think that's, it's taking a step back and realizing, do I really need to compete at this top level, or am I just wanting to be a part of sport? And that's where I think it's gotten a little mixed on this topic too, of, okay, if sport really rationalizes who you are as a person, does it need to be at the varsity level of a collegiate or high school sport? Or are there other areas where you can participate and be involved at the same time? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I know. I think one lens is saying, it can suck that the biological female is needing to be more vocal these days to so-called keep their rights or keep their safety. Yes, that can suck from one lens. At the same time, I know transgender individuals, or those that are identifying as different than traditionally male, female, or man and woman, they've had to fight for their voice in this space. So, and there's value in that too, because people exist in all kind of different ways. So I think it was important for them to speak up, to figure out what are their rights, what space can they occupy, and not just occupy and be a nuisance, but occupy and be respected. So just as much as they had to fight for their voice, now maybe it's time for the biological female's voice to be loud, to speak out for what they feel like they deserve, they need to earn, etc. So it may suck, but at some point, if you want to have change, there needs to be, then you need to be vocal about it, because a closed mouth doesn't get fed. I know it's an old phrase, maybe that ages me, okay, but closed mouth doesn't get fed. So you need to speak up. And traditionally also women had to speak up, or biological females had to speak up in the beginning, because they weren't included in sport because everything was male dominated. So it's almost just a repeat cycle, but who fits the peg now of, okay, initially it was biological females arguing to be brought into sport and being able to compete at a high level. Awesome, we're there. I think that's great. Now it's the transgender, the gender non-conforming individuals that are like, we need a space. Where's our space? And they fought for it. So it's a little bit of back and forth, a little bit of ping pong between those genres right now. Either way, I think the conversations need to be had. We know silence doesn't bring about change per se. So there needs to be very intentional conversations on both sides. But I think nowadays it's whoever's the loudest, who's ever yelling the most, whoever's being the loudest tends to think that they're saying the truth. And being loud and vocal does not always mean you're speaking the truth. It's speaking your truth, but that does not mean it's an objectable truth or truth that's going to bring about good change. So with the athletes that I have under my care, that's often a conversation in the pro men's scene, in the female scene, in the women's sports, in the high school setting. It's often a conversation. And I always try to pause them to say, okay, just as we need to do, let's put ourselves in their shoes. What are they fighting for? What do they need? What do they want? Are they safe? Are we considering those things? Because oftentimes we get pigeonholed to think our own train of thought is the absolute truth. Everything else, what the hell? And that's where I think things can fall apart and things get kind of nasty and hairy there. So,
Yeah.
and with regards to, I guess I'll say gender nonconforming, and for those listening, sorry if I get all this nomenclature wrong, but I'm still learning as well, is I think it's great if they want to compete at a high level. The idea for them, do they need to compete at a varsity level? Do they need to compete at a collegiate level? In my opinion, I don't know if that's the right question, is if they need to. It's if anybody wants to compete at a high level, they should be able to. Now, how do they do so in regards to what is their biological sex at birth? How have they been raised and developed? Have they developed biological female or biological male? Then do we look to categorize it? And how do we decide what demographic they go to? That's where the trickiness is. But them wanting to compete at a high level, I think that's fantastic. Everybody should have the right and ability to compete at that high level. Just where do they fit on what side, or do we need to create a new league or something in the middle? Maybe. I don't have the perfect answer for that.
Well, I think going back to an athletic trainer's responsibility is safety, and that's usually through standardization. And I think that's where I see problems is we have so many standards and rules and regulations on everything else, yet on this, there are no clear-cut standardized rules or testing for a transgender athlete to be able to compete in their gender or the gender that they're transitioning to. And I think that's where it's most difficult for me is that I'm not able to take testosterone to help me compete, yet, there are biological females that have been disqualified because they produce naturally high testosterone levels. And, compared to somebody that's taking it
artificially,
synthetically, I guess,
yep.
Artificially, that's the better word. So, I mean, there was a recent article from Elizabeth Eddy from Angel City for the National Women's Soccer League, and she's calling for clear gender eligibility standards. And I think that's what's kind of the missing piece to this whole equation of, I mean, there has to be some sort of standard, there has to be some sort of testing to make sure that these athletes are meeting the standards. Ultimately, it's all over the board. I think there's the Barbara Banda, the Zambian athlete. They're a soccer player, and the NWSL currently allows men who self-identified as women with minimal testosterone suppression to be able to play in the league. So, I mean, from what that says means that they don't need to be on hormone treatments technically to be able to compete at a professional women's level. So I think that's where it's difficult is I'm not able to take caffeine at a certain level. Well, I think actually in NCAA you're not supposed to take caffeine at all, yet that's a normal cultural thing that happens. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'm going off the rails with that one.
You're not going off the rails. That's fair. I think when Eddie put that out, that is the talk of the town, even still currently, even though it's 2 weeks old.
Yeah.
Still very current. Now, do I think there should be standardization of kind of, do you fit in more of the biological male, biological female category, as she was alluding to? Yeah, I think that's very smart. How do we go about doing that? I'm not sure. I need to brainstorm with that. I don't know. But it would push for there to be importance for that, as we talked about safety. Mm-hmm. Now, this is me just speaking off the cuff. I don't know if there's been articles produced that athletes competing in the women's sports arena that were born biological male or been biological male for most of their life, and maybe they're on testosterone blockers, or maybe they're in transition now, is there truly a massive disadvantage to the biological women that are competing against these individuals? Does it serve as a risk? Is there increased injury or increased risk of harm with them competing? If we can show that to be so, then then I could see why they want to put some standardization on who's allowed to compete in each sector. I think that's very valid. I know that gets a little touchy because, like, okay, how far are we willing to go with testing? Is everybody getting a DEXA? Is everybody getting their T levels checked? When they go through a full medical history, do we really need to go down to, okay, what do you identify with? Okay, what were you born as, etc. How in depth are these medical screenings going to be? How in depth are preseason physicals going to be? That's a tricky area. I think it's an area that needs to be explored. Absolutely. What's going to come of it? I don't know. Again, on the contrary, it's like, let's say you have 10 USL championship players on the men's side that just started taking blockers. They wanted to go try out for the women's team, and they've competed at such a high level. For them to be brought onto an NWSL team, I think, based off speed, skill, power, all that, you would think it would make sense for them to be brought on those teams because of their athletic ability and maybe their technical ability as well. But then how does that muddy the waters where now NWSL teams they're not really NWSL per se, maybe some teams have 4 biological males that individually identify as female, but there's no standardization of, but your testosterone is too high, etc. Then we run the risk of having that. The also risk is, to say these men tried out for the teams, they don't get brought on the teams, and then they file a complaint of sexism. There people being sexist towards males that identify as females and are wanting to play female sports. What's inhibiting them from claiming sexism on that part? That's just me being the devil's advocate, thinking down the road. They could easily go publish an article and say that, I wasn't brought on the team, they're being sexist, it's because I'm this. I mean, it could be as simple as, like, they didn't bring me on the team because I like potatoes and the GM doesn't like potatoes. It could be something stupid. It doesn't have to be gender or sex. The concept is it's something different that maybe a group as a whole doesn't like, so they don't get approved. So where does testing begin? What do preseason physicals look like? Like, what is the standardization? I don't know. But I think Eddie brought up a very valid question to be asked.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, she's being smeared as a transphobic and racist because the player she pointed out was Black and a transgender. But I don't think it's this is where it's been muddied, is that she's just bringing up a debate to talk about, and then she's being labeled negatively and villainized ultimately, when it's a real conversation that needs to be had. And I think that goes to safety and fairness again. I mean, most sports have different levels of competition through weight classes, through, jiu-jitsu, which we work, there's belts for experience. There's all these different levels. There's even genders at this point. So I just, the reasons why we've put these standards on are to help protect the players from inherent risk, and that it creates a fairness and level playing field so that you're not blindsided. I mean, you might as well just go out to Sunday League and just be in the mix of whoever shows up. It could be an ex-professional player. It could be somebody that's never played before. Why do we have standardization at this point if we're going to blur it in these ways, ultimately, with no standardization of what qualifies somebody to be a true transgendered athlete? So
again, this goes back to I know we're not going to solve world hunger on this podcast right now. We're not going to solve this question on this podcast. But I think you bringing this topic up, us talking about it, maybe it starts a conversation in athletic training rooms where it needs to be had. Where maybe it needs to be on physical forms of, what do you identify as and what were you born as? I know those are some valid questions that I would want to know as a clinician. just even in the clinical setting of like, I want to make sure, the way I see it, again, I don't know how people are going to take this who listen to this. Let's say I have someone come in who was born biologically female, is transitioning to male, presents as a male, or as a man, but the way I was raised in a very heterosexual environment. Okay, that's just what I was, and I'm working on understanding the current climate. So they come into my clinic and they present as a man. They talk with a low voice, blah 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 blah. And I ask them, okay, on their intake form, male, female, or transgender. What are their pronouns? I offer all those options in my clinic, so I want to respect them for who they are. So they do that, and then I come to the question, okay, well, what were you born as? Biologically female. So in my head as a clinician, I want to make sure everybody's safe. Everybody feels comfortable in the office. So I don't know their full medical history. I don't know their emotional history. I don't know any of this. I'm trying to get that big picture. They come in and maybe, I don't know, maybe they're actually more comfortable with a traditional female clinician. Maybe they've had negative male encounters, whether that's to the extreme or minimal, and so they've been traumatized. And I am a heterosexual male clinician. So me walking through, like, are you comfortable with me doing an eval? Are you comfortable with moving your leg here? Are you comfortable with me doing this exam? If it's no, 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 or maybe they say yes, but they're not, they could have a traumatized experience from my evaluation. So I think it's important, even in the chiropractic clinic, for me to know these things, because I want to make sure they're comfortable. I know that on the backside, I feel like you don't need to know all that. Just ask if they're comfortable. Ask if they're comfortable. But these things are important in the exam, whether it comes to ligament laxity, whether it comes on when was your last menses, but you identify as a male, but you have your menstrual cycle. Where are you in that cycle right now when I do an evaluation? Because you may present differently. So even on the clinical side, in athletic training room, this is why I think we need to have the conversation too, is it matters when you do an evaluation, how comfortable is someone with someone who is heterosexual doing the evaluation, especially if it's contrary to what they're comfortable to. Or if you're not understanding someone's maybe hormonal imbalances maybe they're going through, because maybe they are transitioning. Okay, how do we alter rehab? How do we alter performance if they're going through testosterone blockers or enhancers? Just like we got to be careful when patients are on steroids or antibiotics and how that affects tendon health, we have to alter their rehab then too. So I think these, if we don't start having the conversations or understanding what our patients, our clients, our athletes are on, that also puts us at a disadvantage to not optimize rehab or performance for them, or make them even comfortable in the training room.
So mental health has become a big point in athletic training. So this is a question that I personally have, and I know that it's been beaten down before, but before an athlete, a patient determines that they need to transition, I have heard that it is very minimal on the mental health support before they make big decisions of hormone therapy or even surgery. From my training, when does this become a body dysmorphia issue? It's a mental health condition where a person spends a lot of time worrying about flaws in their appearance, which I would think if you aren't comfortable with your sexual orientation and you feel like you need to take drastic measures of being reassigned to a different gender, I feel like that's a very big thing that isn't being addressed before drastic measures are taken. And I understand there's the mental health portion of suicide. I know that's a big statistic and problem that a lot of people that may be confused about their orientation or the different aspects of it. This is where I wonder, are we taking enough steps to help support a patient that is going through these things, questioning appropriately rather than just affirming or including them? You have a daughter. I'm sure that she will think she's a princess for as long as she can get away with it. but royalty standards, obviously, we have different interpretations of what a princess is or a superhero. You know, how much do we buy into that, and how much do we actually start asking the hard questions as healthcare providers to really figure out, is it something like they had a bad interaction with the opposite sex or the same sex, and that caused a perception, and how they mentally cope. I This is where, me personally, I've had difficulties in this space of, I don't we harp on mental health, but I don't think we're advocating or supporting in the proper ways to really explore what is going on mentally with this person when they're making these decisions or exploring it. It seems sometimes that we might be inflating these thoughts rather than trying to reground them. I don't know if you have anything on that.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts. And if you see me moving a lot, it's because I'm out here and I'm getting just destroyed by mosquitoes. So if I'm look like I'm just fidgeting, it's because I'm not trying to just get lit up out here. Now I'm gonna say this as a whole. Now, not everybody falls into it, just like we talk about stereotypes. But I think as a whole, no, I'd be bold enough to say most chiropractors and most athletic trainers do a piss poor job at this. One, because again, the cancel culture, the fear of saying something offensive to someone, even though in general it's said with a good heart and good intent. It's someone could be like, I'm offended, they cancel, they write a bad review about you, whatever it is, I think cancel culture has brought a ton of fear into this conversation as well. So let's take collegiate athletes. Over the 18, our legal adults are going to make decisions however they want. Now, I think you and I would agree if an athlete has an ACL tear with medial meniscal involvement, MCL involvement, there's bone damage, you name it. It's the knee's jacked. It's time for surgery. Oftentimes before an athlete goes into surgery, we sit down with them. They vent to us. They cry. They have an emotional response. We say, hey, before we go into surgery, there's prehab. Okay, so let's make sure we get range of motion back before we go to rehab. Let's sit you down with the team sports psychologist to understand, because their identity is so wrapped up in the sport. This is them. They are this sport. Soccer is my sport, so we'll use soccer as an example. Soccer is their lifeline. So how they identify is very much through sport. And all of a sudden their identity feels like it's being stripped away. Who am I outside of the sport? I don't know. And so we often offer, mental health services to get through, one, the rehab process, because it's grueling, and the process before surgery. They may have fear of going into surgery. They may have never had surgery. Oh my gosh, what's this? How's anesthesia? So when there's any big decision or something big happening to the self, oftentimes we want to take a step back and say, am I doing the right thing? What are my options? Let me sit through it. Let me think about it. That's a smart, intelligent thing to do. So I don't think this is being done nearly enough for those that are questioning, am I the gender that I was born as? Am I the sex that I was born as? Or am I something different? Do I really want to commit to transitioning? If they want to commit, we support them. But if someone wants to get surgery, we support them too. But our job as a clinician is to present the options in front. I think there's a fear to present the options for those that maybe want to transition. Now, if you're giving true healthcare advice, you let them know there are inherent risks to operation surgeries, and it doesn't need to be. If you don't want to be as graphic as talking about like genital removal or alteration, just, hey, when you go to surgery, there's automatically complications from a surgery. There's inherent risk of death, infection, etc. So if we're not going to have those conversations with these athletes that are wanting to transition, of just the inherent risk of general operations, the inherent risk of putting foreign things in your body, such as testosterone, estrogen, certain blockers, whatever you have it, doesn't matter what it is, I don't think we're athletic trainers, we're not confident enough to educate them on the potential risks. So one, athletic trainers, if you're listening, educate yourself, go read up on these topics. Otherwise, you fall to, what's the phrase? Yeah, you fall to your training or whatever, you fail to your level of training. So if you haven't trained yourself in these conversations to embrace the awkwardness and have the conversations for the safety of the athlete, then I don't think you're being a good enough clinician. I don't think you do care about them, but do you care enough to educate yourself on the topic at hand? Or are you just, giving a blind eye and saying, go ahead and go do it. I'm affirming this. Just like athletes, you know what? I'm going to go do whatever surgery I want at home. I don't care for my knee. I'm going to get whatever surgery at home. I don't care what you say. Okay, go do it. That's not a good look. So we can compare it to an ACL surgery. Give them the information as I get eaten up back here. Give them the information at hand of the inherent risks, and do your best to keep your bias out of it. That's I think our job as clinicians. People ask me what my bias is, and I'm like, I'm not going to give you my bias. I want to present you with all the information. I want you to go home, and I want you to sit on it, to think about it, and then come back and we can obviously dialogue on questions you think about, the pros, the cons, the risks. I'm happy to have that conversation initially. So that's how I start everything. I don't want to give my bias. My goal as a clinician is to give information and guide clinically.
But how far into that conversation do you talk about longevity and long-term situations? I mean, I don't know if many are talking about, family life after you have a surgery. I mean, you're not going to be able to reproduce, have offsprings.
I straight up have
Males
those
to
conversations.
Females. Yeah.
Yeah, I have those conversations.
I don't feel that a lot of people are having those conversations and really
and that's why I said
educating, like you said.
That's why I said a lot of ATs are doing, I think, a crap job because they're not doing the job. They're not educating themselves on the matter, so they're not going to have those conversations. They just say, "Oh yeah, go ahead and do it. Go ahead and do that surgery.
Yeah.
Go and do that transition. Well, go ahead and take that medication from home. You have no idea where your mom got it from because it's going to make you feel better." That's a piss poor job. So I know we're talking on the topic of transitioning, but it applies to all medical care. That if we're not doing our job as a clinician to educate, to know how to speak to them, just like, let's say if someone's transitioning, I think it's important that you bring it up. If it's a biological female wanting to transition to a male and get rid of certain parts that help with procreation, I don't say, hey, do you want to procreate? It's like, hey, these are things to consider. Procreation in the future may look different or challenging or maybe be rendered impossible with certain operations. Things to consider. You present them with that information, and I don't think ATs have that conversation because it's still taboo. It's awkward. And it's like, you got to be willing to jump in and have that. Just like we tell a lot of athletes that do want to go home and take the, I don't know what's in it, medication from so-and-so international that their mom or dad has because, I've taken my whole life and it feels good. We need to assess that. Is there banned substances that now you're competing illegally in the NCAA because you're taking something that's banned? Like, if we don't look into that, it's not a good look for us.
Well, and I think you did bring up a good point about research. I don't think that people are really addressing the research on these athletes that are competing. But, talking about the longevity, do the male to female trans athletes, do they realize that with estrogen, it's going to suppress their performance too? Like, I mean, I don't know if anybody's had these nitty gritty conversations, but that's where it's interesting to me. Or females to males, you're basically going to kind of go through another puberty stage because you have so much testosterone that we're supplementing into you for your hormonal treatment and therapy. I don't think we get to look or discover these different instances, and there's not any research or articles or anything kind of covering these things to really enable a athletic trainer or a healthcare provider to talk through some of those things, since performance is the main factor of our patients. Are you going to be able to perform at the level that you are right now before or after you take these hormonal supplements, the therapy and all that? And I think that's where it's hard for me as an athletic trainer to get behind these types of things, because I think we're jumping in just so quickly, and I don't have enough evidence to really support any of these changes. Safety again, we have research on female athletes, biological female athletes. They're higher risk for injuries. They have different Q angles. they're at higher risk for ACL. They have different nutrition needs. They have their menstrual cycle. Not that I'm saying I'm a lazy athletic trainer, but throwing a transgendered athlete into the mix of it makes it hard for me to calibrate my database of what am I actually looking for in this athlete and what are they truly at risk for. That's where I kind of get thrown off in this whole thing is I'm not sure how to provide adequate care sometimes because there's just no information on what's the risks of their performance. That's where I get thrown off, I guess.
Yeah, I know. And it's, again, we're talking this through, and
Yeah.
we may talk in a year from now, and there's some light bulb science that comes out. Like, awesome, let's read into that. I don't know. I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the performance side is just like I said with the medical side. If you're not going to present that option to the athlete that wants to transition, then you're doing a disservice. Whether that's, for the lack of a better term, male to female or female to male, you got to talk about the performance side and how that's going to change or has ability to change. Just like sometimes I don't give absolutes to my athletes that are coming back from ACL surgery. Oh, I guarantee you're back at this time. No, because it's so multifactorial. I think the same thing goes for this, for those that want to transition is, hey, here are the things that I have read up on. Here are some of the more common mishaps with operations or transitioning. I'm just presenting you with what I have read and know, and we are able to do that without putting our bias in there. It's just, hey, this is the information that I've read up on because I care about you. I want to present you with these thoughts. Sit on them, think about them. You want to come talk about them? I'm here. And then boom, this is where the mental health comes in. Just that they're going to go do a major operation, they choose to do so, we should schedule a visit with the sports psychologist or whoever we have on campus, whether that's pro sports, NCAA, whatever. I think it'd be important to schedule that visit. The athlete, of course, has the ability to deny it and say, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. No problem, no harm. That's your prerogative. That's your choice. We support it. And then it's our job just to figure out on the back end, how does it look like where we're at whatever level they're competing. If it's a male to female, they're taking blockers, and now their ultimate goal to say was to compete in the NWSL, and now they can compete in the NWSL because their T levels are low enough, then maybe they did achieve their performance goal. So that could be logical thinking on their behalf. But I think, like you said, the mental health stuff, sports psychologists as well, or that operate in that space, have some educating to do as well to make sure they're up to terms, they're up to their knowledge. Okay, how do I mentor someone who's going to transition? Just like how do I mentor someone who feels like they've lost their entire identity because they cannot compete in the sport that they want to compete in? It's an identity crisis. And so how do we assist in that? Again, ATs, listen up, educate yourself on what's out there. We know there's not a copious amount of information on PubMed, but read up on what you can to have these conversations. And if you find yourself looking in the mirror like, I'm not comfortable to have these conversations, then get comfortable. Be willing to have the awkward conversation. You just have to. Just like patients that come into me that are biologically female, and we go through the full screening and we figure out what is their why of why they want to get healthy and move better again. And sometimes it's because they want to have better sex. They want to be able to have different positions when they have sexual intercourse with their partner. So they just need to be more agile, more mobile. And we have to have the talk. We talk about it. It's a real conversation. So don't shy away from it. And if you don't know, you know what you say? You say, I don't know. Give me some time. Let me look up. I'm unsure about this topic. Be honest. If you're not honest, again, that's another flaw. Just be upfront.
Yeah. Well, and then while I was on Instagram, Michelle King, the CEO of the Washington Spirit, she had talked about how women's sports is at a disadvantage because most of the training manuals that are created for women's sports are coming directly from men's training manuals. So performance measures, performance training, all these different things are based on biological males. And that's why females are still somewhat struggling in the performance space at a professional level, just because there hasn't been enough research to adequately figure out different metrics and all those analytical terms, which I think was interesting. 94% of all science and medical research for athletes has been done for men. And so as a biological female, this is my case, is that I want to understand my body better and be able to achieve better performance metrics, or understanding how my body functions better. And I think that's one of the reasons why I want to talk on this subject, is I feel like that's being taken away with the infringement of allowing transgendered males to female sports. I'm going to advocate for biological females, and I think those are some of the pieces. We're obviously just debating, discovering, that's it. But I think that's kind of the hard point that I have to bring up is, yes, there's not a lot of transgendered athletes currently participating. People like to minimize it of, there's only like 10 at the collegiate level, there's only 10 at the high school level. But it's just when we keep allowing it without proper evidence or backing is when it starts to take over. And that's when I get frustrated, is when do females get to stand up for themselves and where their places are at. We have Title IX, which specifically has the verbiage of sex, not gender, which there are a lot of debates between the two on which is which. Sex is biology. So that's where I feel like some of the protections are being infringed on ultimately. And we have a bunch of movements that are trying to protect biological females, the Me Too movement. There's a lot of movements across campuses. And it just feels that we are creating more victims due to our reaction rather than prevention in some of these spaces. Not saying that transgendered athletes are pedophiles, perverted, any of that stuff. But once you start entering spaces that are very intimate, the locker room and all that stuff, that's when it starts kind of crossing a line. And if biological females are not feeling comfortable with that, we're infringing on their rights ultimately. So that's, why this is important to me and wanted to bring it up. And these conversations do need to start being incorporated into athletic departments ultimately. And we need to be professionals and be comfortable to have that debate without cutting other people down by risking their jobs if they have an idea on this or a perspective. And that's why I think this episode is really important. And I'm glad that you came on. Was there anything else that you want to touch on? I know you got people to run back to.
Yeah, I only ate half my Chipotle, so I'm gonna eat the rest of it. And I'm losing daylight. But I think what I want to end with is to summarize not just the topic, but the bubble around the topic is, I'm glad that biological female they have been for a long time. We know they deserve and should have a lot more, and it's getting there.
Mm-hmm.
A little slow of a race, but we know that it's well deserved and earned. But in regards to the current topic of the transgender in the biological female space, speak up. Just like people spoke up about the national anthem or kneeling or all these things that have happened in the last 10, 15 years, you need to speak up so your voice is heard, and then let's work towards progress. Loud does not always mean progress, and loud does not always mean right. I think what I want to say here is I want to implore any head athletic trainer that's over someone, any directors that are over other ATs or mentoring ATs, chiropractors, PTs, if you're supervising other clinicians, I implore you to have these conversations with your staff. The reason I say that is the big push lately is everybody needs to be inclusive, and I agree with that. Inclusivity is great. But in that mix, I feel like a lot of heads, directors, and those that are in supervisor roles, if someone has a different belief than them, whatever that belief may be, again, someone can love the color blue and the head athletic trainer loves the color red, boom, like I don't want you in my clinic anymore. I want to get rid of you. It sounds silly, but inclusivity is important. But the inclusivity conversation, at the end of that conversation, when you stay at the table and have that dialogue, needs to be, even if my belief system is different than that and who's in charge of me, I shouldn't have to sacrifice my role. If I'm being respectful and inclusive of the athletes and the people that I serve and the fellow clinicians, even if my belief system is different, it should not harm me in this position. So I know a lot of ATs and DCs and PTs that are scared to speak up because of different views. Doesn't matter what side of the view it is. They're scared to speak up because of their supervisor, their director, the head athletic trainer. And I think if you're the head and you have this bias that you are pushing on those that you mentor, those that are underneath you, you're doing something wrong, and you're actually hurting the healthcare field. You talk about inclusivity, but you are so gung-ho at disagreeing with an assistant athletic trainer or a subordinate over a different belief system, but they've never been disrespectful. They've always been inclusive. They've always been punctual. They do great work, but you have this about them because they have a different point of view. The person who's in the wrong here is the supervisor, is the mentor, is the director, because you are actually not willing to be inclusive by accepting them with their different point of views and having honest dialogue. So that's kind of how I want to end, because I see a lot of that, and it hurts me to my core because I'm around people that have very different views than me. I love them all the same, and we have these conversations. And we know when we leave this conversation, I may not find resolution right now, but I'm going to build a respect and dialogue with you so that we can figure out what does tomorrow look like. But when we stop doing that, that's where issues arise. So if you really are about inclusivity, no matter what side you're on, then start with being inclusive with your staff that maybe have a different point of view. Because if you're inclusive there, then it trickles down, and who gets the benefit of this inclusivity and these honest conversations? The athletes that we serve. And that's why we do this.
Yep. Got goosebumps. Dude.
Welcome to my TED Talk. No.
Well, thank you so much for being on and providing open conversation, a back and forth. And I hope to have you on soon for another subject. Woo! I've been trying to get you on forever, but I'll get you on another time too. Well, we'll have you on in the near future then. Thanks for being on.
Sounds, of course.
This conversation reminds us why advocacy, education, and ethical decision-making are at the heart of sports medicine. Athletic trainers don't just respond to injuries, we protect environments, uphold standards, and give athletes the confidence that their health comes first. I recognize that this topic sparks a lot of opinions from all sides, and I invite anyone who represents the other side to come on and discuss and join To the Bone. So let's have the conversation respectfully and honestly. If today's episode made you think differently about athlete safety and accountability, share it, start the conversation, and keep it going. So thank you so much for joining us and getting comfortable with the uncomfortable.
That's it for today's episode of To the Bone. I hope we've sparked some new thoughts, challenged your perspectives, or simply reminded you to dig a little deeper. Remember, life isn't just about what's on the surface. Sometimes you've got to cut deeper and get to the bone of what really matters. To the Bone podcast is a product of Daly LLC. It's hosted and produced by Shelby Daly, ATC, and Randy Daly. No clinical decision-making should be based solely on one source. While care is taken to ensure accuracy, factual errors can be present. For more on the show, visit www.tothebonepodcast.com. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Get involved in the conversation. You can find us at www.tothebonepodcast.com. Drop us topic suggestions or be a potential guest. We're all about connecting with you, our listeners. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep cutting deep.